Traveling to Consciousness, exploring spiritual journeys to find answers in uncertainty.
What is up, conscious monkeys? Welcome back to another episode of Traveling to Consciousness. As always, I'm your host, Clayton Cuteri. And in today's podcast, we're going to be talking about immigration and my immigration policy and my ideas about immigration. And before we jump into this, I want to make a big shout out to Ethan. Ethan, longtime follower of the podcast and of my content. He left a comment on one of my videos and he let me know that he wanted to hear more things about kind of the controversial issues that we have boiling in our nation right now. And first of all, I want to thank you, Ethan, if you're listening to this podcast, because I think he's right. I think I spend a lot of time talking about, how they're poisoning our food, our water, our air, how we need to stop war, how we need to, our education system, our medication system. And even though these are like the bedrock foundations of what really motivated me to get into politics, I think he's right. I think it makes so much more sense in the spirit of authenticity, of transparency, of letting you guys know who I am more as a politician. I think these are extremely important things to discuss, are the things that are being talked about in the mainstream narrative. And I'm sure you're going to hear those things kind of boil up in these answers, especially with immigration, kind of those policies of how they're going to integrate and actually help fix these other mainstream issues, right? So I'm really thankful for you, Ethan. And then also just kind of wanted to put that out there as that I'm going to start trying to show you how these policies, or my vision at least, of how these policies are going to affect and influence all of these into a more positive direction. And so immigration is going to be the one that we start off with today. And when we start off with stuff, I'm a huge proponent of clarifying terms, because if you have listened to anything I've ever said, there's a war on language, 100%. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. There's a war on language within the mainstream narrative, within the corporate run narrative. And we need to start off by clarifying two terms in specific: illegal and legal. I know, right? How crazy it that we have to actually define those two things. So as we're moving through this conversation, we need to all be on the same page. Please don't get triggered. But there is a classification of people who, when they enter the country illegally, are known as illegal aliens. Okay? And then there's another classification of legal immigrants, legal immigration. So we have to be very clear whenever we're talking about these things, because when we talk about them, we have a tendency to lump up immigration into just one thing, because, it's undocumented citizens. It's, they try to play these word games to spin the narrative. All right. So I'm going to be using the term illegal aliens whenever I'm denoting someone who has entered this country illegally, because that's the way that it's defined in the law. So we have to get back to having a clear understanding of what we're talking about. Otherwise, we're going to get confused, because that's definitely a part of the corporate agenda, the not the oligarchy. Yeah, maybe it would be the oligarchy agenda, but the one world agenda is just to confuse you, so you can't have a good conversation about it. So with that being said, that's the very first segment of this idea. And I have about 6 segments, okay, that will feed into this, right? So the segment number 1 is the war on language. We need to clarify and have meaningful, because it's very important, right? Because if you're a legal immigrant, you've immigrated here legally, I'm sure those individuals would be the most upset with the fact that illegal aliens are being treated far better than our citizens, legal immigrants. Think about our veterans. Our veterans are homeless, and yet we're putting up illegal aliens into hotels, and we're just, giving them medication. We're giving them all these things, all these benefits that we honestly should be benefiting our own people, but yet because they did something illegal, they're now getting benefits for it. I think that's a terrible precedent to set. So moving along, and this kind of goes into the second segment of the immigration, which would be tourism and visa reform. So I was in second grade whenever I saw 9/11 occurred, whenever I saw those towers come down and Building 7. Whenever I saw those buildings come down. And since then, we have had a massive decline in tourist visas being issued. We've been a lot more stringent on it. And I think this has been to a great detriment of the American people, because that's the only way that we are going to be able to get money from other countries, right? I mean, I don't agree with the fact that we're sending all this money to Ukraine, to Israel, to fight proxy wars. I don't agree with that at all. But now that we have, how are we going to get that money back? They try to claim that it's coming back through other means and it's all a farce. But the way we can actually get that back is by issuing more tourist visas, encouraging businesses to come into America. But right now, we're not doing that due to 9/11, because they decided that was a great excuse to take away more of our rights, even though we don't have to go down that rabbit hole. That would be a whole podcast on its own. But we have to reshape essentially our visa policies. And I think specifically when it comes to tourism, I think we could look even into like H-1B visas. And I'm not an expert in this matter by any means of the stretch of the imagination. I definitely need to do more research on my behalf before I sign any policies or sign any documents regarding this. But from my very basic understanding, we need to reform these so that we're encouraging more people to come to America, to essentially to tour, to come visit, to bring their money, bring their business, inject it into the American economy so that we can thrive. And I have another piece to this about when it comes to that specifically. I do think we need to create another national what are they called? Oh, another wonder of the world, wonder of like the modern world. And I want to create that in Pittsburgh. Actually, I'm gonna plug that right here. I have a great idea where the Ohio, the Allegheny, and the Monongahela all meet, that we should put in a giant tree. I've mapped this out. I figured out some of the pricing. I probably need to do a little bit more pricing. But if we create another modern marvel or modern, I'm forgetting the word for it. I didn't plan to be talking about this. Wow, I'm losing my train of thought. Like another wonder of the ancient world, 7 wonders of the modern world. Like if we add another wonder of the modern world, we can add it in Pittsburgh. And what this does is within, we'll put a tree. Sorry, I'm trying to collect my thoughts here. But essentially what the vision is of a giant tree being embedded into the rivers, the side beds of the rivers, where then it comes out of the river and would be like a giant tree, almost light bulb. We can put a restaurant in the middle of the tree, kind of like where the stump would, or not the stump, but the trunk of the tree is. There'd be a restaurant in the middle there. We could do 2 restaurants if we wanted to. It'd be big enough. And then have locally sourced, local regenerative farmed food served at this scratch kitchen restaurant in the middle of the tree. So I'm just putting that out there. And the reason I say that is because this would be another way to increase our economy. And I am assuming when we do an economy podcast, this will be included in there. But by adding this wonder, it would cost a couple $1 million at least. Let's say ballpark $5 to $10 million. Now, this sounds like a lot of money, but in the big scheme of things, it's actually tremendously beneficial, because all the wonders essentially of the modern world, I've looked at Seattle, again, my brain's a little hazy right now because I didn't plan to be talking about this. But the one that's in Seattle, and then there's also the tower that's in Canada. The CN Tower. Is it the CN Tower? I really apologize for this. This is being botched, but this is what transparency looks like, right? Not polished, not perfect. But so my point is that all of these, even the one in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, which I think is a little bit out of the way, so I didn't really count that, but the other ones, they increase and generate about $1 billion for the economy, because people come to see these natural wonders of the world. So this would be a huge way for Pittsburgh to generate a massive amount of money for our city, for our economy. It would drive so much tourism to our city. That would be crazy. Okay, so now we'll save that for an economic conversation. I'll have more numbers kind of polished out for you guys when we discuss that. let's get back to tourism, but this is what we need. This is what we need to update our tourism policy for, so that we can get more people to Pittsburgh, so that we can increase our economy, have more money. Our citizens are going to be more taken care of because you'll have more money in the economy. You'll be able to do more. You'll be able to work more. Everyone will be happy. Okay, so moving along, we reshaped visas. We have reshaped our tourist visas specifically, but also other visas to help people get into the country a little bit more, so that we can increase our economy in a legal way. I think another segment would be a slightly easier path to citizenship. I do think that it's a pretty solid one, but it does seem like it takes a little bit of upfront cost. If people truly want to move here, I say, more the merrier, right? Like, we've got plenty of resources to go around. More people come, it creates more GDP for our country. I think it's a win-win. We still have plenty of space, even though the globalists will tell you that we don't. We definitely do. So I think we should at least look at that. Again, I haven't taken a deep dive into specifically what I would change, but I do know that it is a difficult path to become a citizen. So I would say that. Now, this is the important part, because I think that touches on all the legal framework that I would change. But now we have to look at the illegal side of what is going on and why we're seeing massive amounts of people flooding into our country illegally. The number one thing that creates illegal aliens is having crises in foreign countries. When you destabilize their governments, you create a hostile environment for the citizens of those countries, and they have to flee. A perfect example in today's age would be what's happening in Gaza. It's a perfect example. Ukraine, maybe not so much, because they're able to defend themselves. But what's happening in Gaza right now is creating a massive pressure on all the other surrounding countries. You can see what's happening in the UK right now with tensions flaring out of control. And I mean, that's just a hotbed of problems. And I'm just going to leave that out there, because that, again, completely own podcast on its own. But whenever we allow massive carnage to happen on innocent people, they have to flee. I mean, are you going to stay in a house that's going to crush you? No, you're going to leave. You're going to try to leave that country. When your option is only to die, you're going to do anything you can. Yeah, you're going to try crossing into any country illegally. So in order to minimize the illegal aliens coming into our country, we have to stop destabilizing and overthrowing other governments, other countries. Because that's what we're doing right now. We're funding Israel to carry out this genocide on Gaza. Now, of course, Hamas is not doing anything, isn't helping the cause by them shooting their missiles into Israel. But if you pull back the layer, and I didn't know that this was actually mainstream knowledge, I don't know if it's mainstream, but if you look it up, and I haven't talked about this because I hadn't seen anyone else talk about it yet, so now that I've heard it, I feel like I can actually mention it. The US and the CIA, specifically the US government, has been cited of funding the Taliban with over $240 million. Do you remember in Afghanistan when we left all that military equipment, and I think it was in the ballpark of $80 million of equipment? They could just do whatever they wanted with it. That's one way that we fund these terrorist organizations. Because think about it. It's one of the only ways that people can survive. And so that means that there has to be a value, right? The reason you do something is because there's a value add. And if you look at the weapons that a lot of these terrorist organizations have, they are not things that you and I can buy at a store. You have to go through some wild channels to get the type of equipment that they have. So for me to sit here and for anyone listening to think that, they're just kind of doing this based on their faith, we've been led astray from that. That's not the whole truth. That's not essentially the truth that's happening here. It's a money business. Terrorism makes them money. That's why they do it. There's plenty of stories of husbands who, ISIS comes in, the Taliban comes in, and basically rolls up everyone and says, hey, you can either have a job or we can kill your family. Because they've essentially been given that permission from the world governments to do that. And you can look it up. I didn't realize that this was something that was widely known until recently. And so that's why I'm feeling called to talk about it. And so, on top of all of this, how many times has the US government, especially in the Middle East, went in, overthrew a government, and then you create a massive refugee crisis? And then when they show up at our border, it's like, oh, we have to welcome them in. We just have to. I mean, and look at this too, right? The games they play, the games that the corporate media plays, that these world governments play, where, okay, we'll go and destabilize this country in the name of America. America goes, destroys a country, and then we let those people come into our country, right? Those people aren't there because they love America. If anything, they're going to have hatred in their hearts for the country that just destroyed theirs. I mean, just think about that. Is that not insane? That has to be insane on some level, right? And that even leads us in then to kind of the fifth part of this, right? If you will. Or maybe that's the sixth part. I lost count. But that's war. That's protecting the innocent people. If we stop war, we stop funding terrorism, we protect innocent people, we don't allow mass genocide to be happening at the scale that it has happened since October 7th. And this is happening around the world, by the way. It's not just in Gaza. I know we're all watching Gaza very, very closely because it's like the biggest one in our minds right now. But there are plenty of other places that this is occurring in the world. So we have to stop this. We have to stop the funding of terrorism. We have to stop the funding of any government that's going to kill innocent people. Because that's who I want to represent whenever I get into Congress. That's who I want to represent when I become a politician, is the innocent people. I don't care about representing the global leaders who have no skin in the game. No skin in the game of killing people, of carrying out these mass killings. And it's brutal too. I saw a video the other day that involved men forcing themselves, soldiers within these armies, forcing themselves onto innocent civilian women. And I think it's absolutely horrendous that this is still occurring. You want to talk about, oh, it's the 21st century, we should be so much wiser. It's like, where's the accountability for these tyrannical regimes carrying these things out? It's sick. It's absolutely sick. We have to care about the innocent man and woman, the innocent children. Because right now, I look around the entire world and maybe there's one, maybe there's one leader I can even think of, maybe two now that I'm thinking about it, who actually care about the common person, the common man. And they're some of the most popular leaders in the world. And I guess that's great, right? Like, you know, if you want to sit up here and think of, but we have to care about the innocent people. Those are the people who we need to make policies in the minds of, thinking what is in the best interest of them. Because all of this, all of these things, ending the war on language, talking about the importance of tourism, the visa reform, the eighth wonder of the world in Pittsburgh, easier pathway to citizenship, America, its role in global destabilization of governments and funding terrorist organizations, protecting innocent people, reforming all of this immigration. I mean, to me, this is the winner. I don't know. I'm open to other ideas if you have any other ideas, but like all of these, and I think we would see a massive decrease in hatred in the world. Massive decrease. Massive decrease. And isn't that the end goal? Shouldn't that be what our vision is for the world? To leave the world better than we found it would just be like less hatred. And it seems to me if you want to create more hatred, you keep killing people. Because an eye for an eye leaves the whole world blind. So guys, I appreciate it. If you feel like there's anything I missed in this, I know on Spotify you can leave a comment. If you have any feedback on, you think maybe there's some ideas that I went over quickly, whatnot, please leave a comment on Spotify. Also comment on YouTube. I haven't been posting too many videos lately. I'll get back to that within the next couple of months. Looking for some video editors, so feel free to shoot me an email, support or contact at clayton24.com. I'll read those emails. I'll get back to you. So if you're a video editor, reach out to me. We're looking for a couple more. And leave a comment. Subscribe on all the platforms. I've been trying to be a little bit more, vocal on X. Subscribe to wherever you listen to these. Leave a 5-star review. But just know that I appreciate you guys. And this is what's so important about being spiritual and getting into politics, is that you actually care about the next generation. You treat everybody like they're your brother, your sister, your mom, your dad, your aunt, your uncle, your cousin, because at some level, that's what we all are to each other. And we have to find a way to end this hatred. Because I'm telling you, we can do that by voting American Congress Party. And if you don't believe me, send me a message. And if you don't feel called yet to send a message, that's also okay, because I know that we're going to have a conversation about it whenever we see each other in the 6th dimension.